Hey, Mum, where do babies come from? Hey, Dad, how did my brother end up in our family? These are the questions that so many parents don't really know how to answer. Like, we know how to answer them, but when our child comes to us and asks the question on the spot, usually in front of friends at a barbecue or around the dining table, we take a big deep breath and wonder, how do we get through this next couple of moments with our child? Today on the Happy Families podcast, I'm speaking with Michelle Mitchell, the author of Where Do Babies Come From? And Other Questions Children Aged 8 to 12 Ask. This is the Happy Families podcast, real parenting solutions every day on Australia's most downloaded parenting podcast. My name's Justin Coulson, and today Michelle Mitchell, the author of the book, joins me to talk about it. Michelle, has it ever happened to you? Did either of your two boys walk up to you and say, "Hey, Mum, I need to know"?
Do you know what? I actually asked them this the other day, and I don't even know how this conversation came up, but I said, do you remember us actually having this conversation? And both of them said, nah.
You obviously did a great job.
We actually can't imagine or remember it actually being a formal conversation. So we obviously drip-fed this information somehow, because they do know where babies came from.
Okay. I should just mention as well, by way of intro and bio, Michelle is the convener of the Resilient Kids Conference that travels around the country on an annual basis and dispenses incredible parenting wisdom. And you've also written several other books, including I've got some of them here on my bookshelf. Tweens, which is an absolute bestseller and a must for parents of children in that 8 to 12 category. But you've also written The Girl's Guide and the Guy's Guide to Puberty. And my 11-year-old daughter, Emily, loves those books. They are they're a permanent fixture on our living room floor. She doesn't like the boys' one so much, but she does like the girls' one a lot. And we've been over it and over it and over it. So when your new one came out, Where Do Babies Come From? I instantly contacted you and said, got to have it. Emily's going to need it. And I don't know a single person in this country or on this planet that I trust more, based on what you do with the puberty books, to help parents have this conversation with their children.
I'm so grateful, and I loved getting your text message. Like, my daughter's so excited to read this, and I was like, oh, it's so beautiful to hear that they're actually excited about diving into a book like this. And I have 25 years of really funny stories and good jokes, and I am not going to die without them being recorded in a book.
So, Michelle, hit me with one. Tell me one of your jokes.
Well, okay, so Teeny Tiny Trouble, that's the baby, goes for her first scan, and she doesn't want her private parts to be seen. So she hides for the sonographer, and instead of getting any look at her private parts, she just gives the sonographer like a big moon. So all the 10-year-old boys will love that, because the baby just moons at the sonographer. Do you get it?
Yeah, I do.
You're not laughing.
I was looking for more. That is funny. No, I get it. It's funny, Michelle. It's funny.
No, and look, the baby says, now this is what you get, a full moon. You've got to be 10, Justin, to get into that kind of humour.
I need to go through the book. It's in the book. It's funny. Yeah, in the book with the cartoon, it's funny.
Yeah.
Michelle, let's make this about my history for a sec. When I was about, I think maybe 11, 10, my mum came home one day. I remember standing in front of the garage of our orange brick home at Niagara Park on the New South Wales Central Coast, top of the driveway. And Mum says, "Hey, Justin, quick question. Do you know where babies come from?" I'd figured that out by what I'd heard in the playground around about grade 3, somewhere between the ages of 8 and 9. But of course I lied and said to Mum no, because I thought I might get in trouble if she knew that I knew.
That's right. Mum might think I'm rude. Kids say that to me all the time.
Totally, that's right. And so I said no. And then she pulled a little book out called Where Did I Come From? Or Where Do I Come From? Or something like that.
Yes.
I mean, it was a classic for decades. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, I got this book and I thought it might help you to understand things. Would you like to read it with me, or would you like to read it on your own?
And what did you say?
What do you think I said? Got to be kidding. I'm not reading this with you. I said, of course, I'll read it on my own. I knew I didn't need to read it because I already knew the answers. Nevertheless, I still read it because kids are curious.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell me, why are we not using Where Did I Come From anymore? Why did we need you to write this book? And for what it's worth, I'm a huge fan of what you've done here. But why did you decide it was time for an update after 4 decades of that one being pretty dominant?
There's a few things going on here. This book is for 8 to 12-year-olds. So this is a little bit more comprehensive. There's 156 pages here. So this is for kids who are ready for a little bit more of those wraparound topics, who have more extensive questions. I call it that age where they're cognitively ready to be asking questions. So there's a lot more medical information. I find that when I go into schools, boys are just wanting to particularly absorb that medical information about how babies grow, and they just love it. They really, really love it. So it's not a picture book like Where Did I Come From?
Yeah, with like the mum and the dad hiding under the covers, and you kind of get the sense that the covers are moving a little bit, so there's something going on under there.
That's right. The other thing I do is I use medical diagrams, and I think that's really important in this day and age. We're talking to our kids a lot more about pornography and the difference between, inappropriate maybe images for kids to look at. When I go into schools, I'm very, very clear that these are medical diagrams. And so you'll see the anatomy, and it's a really soft way to explain sexual intercourse to kids. So if you go on my shop page, you'll actually see how I have done that and why I do that in this day and age. So that's another key difference. The other difference that a lot of people don't know is the latest research has changed as well. We used to say that it was the fastest, strongest sperm that reached the shell of that egg and cracked into the shell of that egg that actually sort of won that shell, that egg. But it's actually not. The egg gets the final say on which sperm penetrates that shell. And that is new research. And you'll see in the comics that is really reflected. The egg actually says, I knew I was popular, but this is slightly overwhelming. So you can see that the egg makes
That's good. I really like that one.
Oh, you like that one?
I like that one.
All right. I should have been a little funnier to start with. I want our kids to say, I'm smart enough not to be fooled, I'm confident enough to make wise decisions, and I'm educated enough to know how wonderful my body is. And our kids just don't need to know, I guess, the birds and the bees chat anymore. There's a whole lot of wraparound values that need to come with these conversations. So this book is not just a picture book.
I really want to spend some time on the wraparound values concept. I feel quite the same. I think that when we separate emotional intimacy from physical intimacy, we end up with a transactional intimate. Well, it's not even intimate anymore, is it? It becomes a transactional rather than intimate moment. It takes away from the significance and even the sacredness of that intimate moment by simply making it performative, recreational. I don't think that we should be separating emotional intimacy from what we might call physical intimacy. And yet that's what we typically do when we have a birds and bees conversation. So let's step into that for a minute. How do you convey these wraparound ideas and values in a book that's written for 8 to 12-year-olds to literally pick up and flick through themselves to get this information, as much as we want parents to read it with them?
Lovely. And this comes from our heart first, doesn't it? It comes from who we are. And it's counter to a lot of the imagery that they're seeing in the movies. So their idea of what sex is coming from a lot of like quick grabs and flicks that they're even getting in advertising or little snippets they're seeing in the movies. So it is really, when you're starting to actually sit next to a kid and actually explain the details of it, a lot of kids are going, I never want that to happen to my body. And one of the biggest things I actually say back to kids is, what the best news is? If you don't ever want that to happen to your body, you don't have to, because guess what? Anything to do with sex is 100% your choice, and you don't have to make that decision now. This is a decision you make when you are much, much, much older, because neither your body or your heart is ready to make that decision right now.
I love that. In the interest of preserving anonymity for my children, but still sharing a great story, just in the last couple of weeks, one of my children, who is definitely in an age group where it's appropriate to be having curiosity and conversations in this vein, just said to me, I can't believe that that's what you and Mum had to do so that we could be conceived. And she just said, she was honest. She said, I'm curious and I'm interested, but I really, really don't like anything about this right now. And I looked at her and I gave her a great big hug and I said, And that's just right for you right now. At some point that will change, but right now that's where you should be. And let's celebrate that. And you can still ask me anything. We can still talk about anything because the curiosity is natural and normal. And I'd rather you ask me than ask Google.
And Justin, I love that. And when I stand up in front of, just say grade sixes, and they feel awkward and they feel nervous and, they're all like, oh, what's she going to say? I actually really validate that feeling. And I say, I'm so glad you feel like that, because that feeling right there is actually designed to protect you in life.
Great.
If a stranger was in front of you wanting to talk to you about your body or anything to do with sex, and if it was anyone other than a safe, trusted person who had, like I tell them that I've had to get signed off by, the Australian government to be able to speak about this in schools. And then your parents have had to say that they believe I'm a trusted adult. And then I have to have teachers in this room who are going to listen to every word, and they are going to fly down these aisles and grab me by the neck and drag me out if I say one word wrong. I really hype it up because I want them to know that it's a job that adults take very seriously. And the reason why they're nervous is because I'm about to step into a space that's very sacred. And so I hope this book actually transfers that as well. And the whole first chapter is about them becoming the book boss. And the book boss actually gives them a whole list of questions to work through with their trusted adult, which gives them autonomy and choice over how they want to have these conversations.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, and I think that to me was actually a really important start point. So I actually say to them, how do you want to read this book? Choose your level of privacy. Do you want to have a look at this book first by yourself, or would you like to read it side by side with your trusted adult? How are you most comfortable? Find the best time. Where do you want to actually read the book? Let's talk about how you might handle any big feelings now. So in other words, I meet kids that when they actually do read parts of the book, they might go away and actually do feel a little bit anxious. And I want them to have a plan for that now. So let's agree together, I say here, that if you have any awkward feelings, that you're not just going to talk to a friend or someone who is at school. Friends are great for playing computer games, but not great for answering life's important questions. So we go through that before we start. Making it memorable. How about this one? If you're going to have a special grown-up conversation, you may as well make it memorable. I personally think hot chocolate and dunking biscuits will be the perfect addition to this book. Or there's a grander idea. How about an increase in your weekly pocket money in exchange for some talking time? Surely that's not too much to ask, is it? What ideas do you have? So this is stuff that they're actually negotiating with you, Justin Coulson. And then one last thing, is there anything else on their mind? So this is about ownership. Now, that might seem in some ways, surely they don't need to have this big setup before we talk to them about the birds and the bees. Yes, they do, because this is about consent. This is about respect. This is about them having a say as an 8, 9, 10-year-old. And then we're going to talk about the qualities of trusted adults. And then we're going to lead into, this soft start where they're going to have such empowerment before we get to some of the more heavy-duty topics that we need to.
Michelle, when I have a look at what limited data we have, and there's very little data on this that I've been able to find, it seems that a lot of parents are very uncomfortable talking to their children about this, and many parents would rather not do it at all. There are also some cultural differences. Okay, so people from one culture may be less likely to want to have this conversation than people from other cultures. Like this is a real thing. Why is that? I mean, are we overcomplicating it? Is it supposed to be something that we're nervous about? Why are so many parents so nervous about talking about intimacy, physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, sexual intercourse, procreation?
There's so many things. We didn't get it modeled very well. I think a lot of us have had bad sexual experiences as well. And so, that comes into play. Yeah. I think we don't want to get it wrong either. And we're scared of not sort of knowing what to say if our kids ask us an awkward question. I think the cultural thing is real. In the book, I talk about different talking styles that parents have. And I say to the kids, it doesn't matter how your family prefers to talk. Some families talk around the dinner table openly and others talk really privately. As long as your parents are talking, it doesn't matter how they're talking. And I think that's a really important message for parents to take away as well, because I meet a lot of parents in my parent nights that just, they just say, look, we're not the kind of family that would talk openly about this across the dinner table. And I say to parents, you know what, as long as you are talking to your kids, it is okay. I say to parents, just please don't do this. Don't just slap the book on their bed, run for your life and say, please come to me if you have any questions. That's normally what we do.
That's what my mum did, right?
I know, that's what we do. But I think what we're doing is we're putting too much responsibility on our kids' shoulders when that really is too much for them, especially in this day and age. What we want to say is this book is an extension of me. So we say, I've read this book. I thought it was pretty funny. Page 157 was my favorite. That's the mooning page, Justin,
right,
that
okay.
I didn't even get one laugh out of you about. But tell me what you think of it. Or, there's this talk at school coming up soon. And how about you and I have some chats before that talk comes to your school? There's all sorts of ways to sort of initiate this. But it's just so we're not putting too much on our kids' shoulders at a time in their life where they're not ready. You know what the research says? If they haven't started asking questions by the time they're 10, it's not that they don't have questions, it's that they're too uncomfortable to ask. So it's on us to open the door.
Michelle, what I love about the puberty books is I know how to talk to my kids about this stuff, but the books give me a framework. They give me a structure. They give me a sequence, and they just provide so much leverage into the conversation. My sense is that Where Do Babies Come From allows that same it changes the dialogue. It gives us the structure. It gives us the direction. It gives us the thing to point at and say, hey, well, let's talk about this page, or let's talk about this chapter. Let's talk about this theme. It changes the quality, the tenor, the experience of the conversation that we have with our children. The other thing that really stands out to me as important here is that, as you said, this is a book with more than 150 pages in it, which means that you can't really just sit down and say, all right, well, we've had the talk.
No, and it's 250, Justin. And kids can come back to this time and time again. Now, remember, it's broken up with comics. There's really big size font. There's a little bit on cyber safety. There's a little bit on sexual consent and body safety. So it's got these wraparound values in it as well. There's a lot about the 3 trimesters and the baby growing, and it's really cute and fun. But it's stuff that kids can dip in and out of. And I think when we just talk to kids and they can't dip in and out of that and refresh their memory and come back to the facts quite as easily.
I'm an ambassador for the federal government's Consent Can't Wait campaign. And you've raised consent a couple of times in this discussion. Yes. So let's say that we're talking about 8 to 12s, right? These are kids who they're far too young to be involved in any kind of physical intimacy, but the consent conversation still matters. And the overwhelming data that we see through the federal government's campaign and their research is that parents don't know how to talk about consent generally, but they especially don't know what to say to younger children because they feel like consent is only about physical intimacy. They don't realize that consent is a much broader conversation. So how are you introducing it in the book, and what can parents do in that specific zone? Because it is, to me, it's one of the most important conversations we can be having right now.
To me, it's a much broader conversation than anything to do with sex, and it's almost a completely separate conversation that then heats up as our kids get older. But even those small things like giving our kids, that real say in, making sure they have the say whether to keep their bathroom door closed when they're having a shower.
Yeah,
Or
great.
it's not okay for their little brother to walk in and out of the room if they're getting changed. It's simple things like that in our house that sometimes we're like, oh, it's not a big deal. But our kids hit 11 and get really self-conscious, and it is a really big deal to them. And I think it's just making sure that our kids get that voice and that say and that respect the moment that they vocalize it in our homes. I think that's on a very practical level. When I'm speaking to kids in schools, I make sure that they're really clear that sex is not for kids. It's for someone that you love, trust, and it's a very private thing because it involves your body, and you can imagine how serious that is. And because they're imagining then their physical body, they're actually feeling the weight of that. And I want them to know that their bodies are important. I want them to know that they're valuable. And the moment kids are ready to get this information update and they really digest the seriousness of that, that's the moment that I think they're ready to really understand that, hey, your precious body needs to be protected. And that there gives you an inroad to have some of those conversations.
Yeah, I love this. One of the consent conversations that I lean on pretty heavily is that when my daughters were young, obviously 6 daughters, so I'd take them for a bath, right? Like it's time for a bath, and Kylie would say, "Can you go and scrub the kids because I'm doing this thing or that thing?" And we were outnumbered, so I would do whatever I was asked to do. And as a father, as much as some people might raise their eyebrows at this, I used to love bathing my kids. Like it was sacred time. I got to be with them, and there's that skin to skin, and it's just really, really great. So as they got older, and I no longer had to bath them with the same level of input, I'd still have to be there to keep them safe. And then as they got older again, I was just there basically to make sure that they scrubbed themselves, because sometimes they'd sit in the bath for 25 minutes and never touch the soap.
Yeah.
But even from a young age, I would say to them, okay, would you like to scrub yourself, or do you want Dad to do it? And specifically around their private parts of their body, I would say, would you like to scrub there, or would you like Dad to? And I just sort of highlight to parents, this is consent. You're just checking in. Is it okay for me to do this, or would you rather, how do you want this to play out? Now with adolescents and kids in their 20s, I will still get consent before I share my opinion. So I say, hey, I've got an idea. Would you be open to hearing it, or would you rather that I keep this one to myself?
I think that's actually very, very good with girls too.
You remember that? Thank you.
And knowing you too, Justin, knowing you, I think that's a very good idea.
Because I do like to share my opinions, right? That's what you're saying. I get the feeling that's what you're pointing at. But what I find as well is that once consent is given, there's just a wonderful acceptance. Respect. There's a respect. There's an openness, and it works. Consent is about so much more than just what happens between two people in a physical way. I'm really glad that you shared what you did there. Michelle, I have a couple of other quick questions for you about what's in the book. There's a really big part of this book that is about identity. Now, before I ask you about why, many years ago when I put together my resilience presentation, the first thing that I put in there was kids need to know who they are. They need to know whose they are. They need to understand their family story. They need to know their identity, because the more they know who they are, the more resilient they're able to be, the stronger they can be. They've got roots that will hold them in place when those fierce winds blow. Every time I share that, people kind of go, oh, yeah, I always thought resilience was about doing hard things, but when you know who you are, that works. In the context of teaching kids about procreation, where does identity fit? Why did you put that there?
And there's a difference between where babies come from and your family story. And in the context of respect of people, in the context of consent, in the context of some of these values we've been talking about, even when a child walks into a classroom of 27 other kids, they actually have to understand that everyone has a different story. I have some really dear friends that have adopted 2 beautiful boys. And they are at the age where they were ready to have this conversation in an information update type of way with their boys. And I wanted to make sure this was a book that those boys, I'm going to cry, Justin, that those boys would just feel just as loved, just as respected, and just as valued and honoured as any other child on the planet. And their those boys' mother was too ill to take care of them, and they were from a third world country, and so much trauma for a child to come out of. Why would you ever want a conversation like this to add to their trauma? So every page of this book, in my mind, I'm reading it through the eyes of a child who had complex family stories. And you know my working history, Justin. You know that I've worked with child safety. I've worked with refugee families. I've worked with so many diverse family situations. And I want to honour every child. And so I guess there's three superstars in the story. There's a uterus, there's an egg, and there's the sperm. But then there's a family story that wraps around that. And the trusted adults in children's lives are the real heroes that love and bring the security and safety around a child's life. And there's 50 questions that kids answer in a part of this book, like a journal activity. And I tell them that these questions are really tricky, and it's unlikely that they're going to get an answer to every single one of these questions. But for some kids, they're going to be on like a bit of a treasure hunt to see how much that they can find out about who they are with the help of the adults in their lives.
Really appreciate you sharing that, Michelle. As we draw this conversation to a close, I want to pick up on a theme that underscored much of what you just said, and that is the role of parent. The need for parents to provide security and safety and to support their children as they figure out who they are and they embark on what will ultimately hopefully be a really fulfilling and joyful experience with physical and emotional intimacy in the sexual component of their lives. Can you just talk a little bit more about the role of parents and for those children who, for various reasons, may not have access to parents to guide them here, the role of carers and other significant and important and trusted adults in children's lives in terms of how this conversation plays out?
Yeah. I mean, you take values away from a child, you take those anchor points away from a child, and you just knock the legs out of decision-making in the most critical times and the years of their life. And I guess resources like this in some ways are my, subconscious way of trying to be there in spaces and places of kids' lives where maybe they have half-present adults. Maybe in some way they can read my words and it fills a gap in their lives that an adult can't fill for whatever reason in that child's life at that time. I feel like parents, anything that you can do to instill and transfer strong values in these years between, say, 8 to 12 before they hit those teenage years are completely irreplaceable. You can't get those years back. Once they hit 13, 14, 15, at least they have a blueprint, which now, whether you like it or not, they're going to make some of their own decisions based around and on and up against and through, but that blueprint stays with them forever. And these years are so open. It's the second rapid time of growth in their life as opposed to toddlerhood. Their brain's developing at the speed of lightning between 8 and 12, and they're absorbing your values at such a quick pace.
One quick observation as you say that, it springs to mind that I rarely get excited about having a conversation with my children about these kinds of topics. Yeah. And yet the opportunity to share, the opportunity to listen, the opportunity to impart those values generally turns those conversations into some of the most delightfully unexpected positive experiences and positive interactions that I've ever had with my children. I actually really love these conversations.
And Justin, guess what? You could swap this topic up for I don't care less. But this is about connecting with your kid.
Right.
And this is just the tool in the vehicle. Can I just share one beautiful thing that a mum said to me just a few weeks ago? She came up to me and she said her daughter had been really nervous about this conversation. And after the book and after the conversation, she came to her mum and she said, "Mum, thank you for buying me that book and thank you for talking to me. And Mum, can we keep this book? And when I have a daughter, I'm going to have this conversation with my daughter and I'm going to use this book." And I just went, "Oh, I'm just loving this." And it's because the moment mattered. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about birds and bees or whatever. It's the moment that matters. And if this matters for your child right now, show up and do it well and make sure growing up's fun. That's what I reckon. Justin, I want parents to know that there's all sorts of information about assisted reproductive therapy as well, because that's such a big part of a lot of kids' journey. That's just the only thing that I think we didn't mention, but I think we covered so much ground here.
I've loved the conversation. The book is called Where Do Babies Come From? And Other Questions That 8 to 12-year-olds Ask. You've sold tens of thousands of copies of this book already. I'm a little bit slow to the party getting you on the podcast. The book's been out for a little while now, but we will link to it in the show notes. And hopefully there'll be a huge bunch of people who are listening to the pod and saying, "Oh yeah, I need some guidance here. This is exactly the book that we need in our home." We love having it on our bedside table and giving our kids access to it. This podcast conversation has prompted me to pull it out and go through it even with a couple of my bigger kids, because it's been a while since we've had some of those conversations, and I just think there's so much value in the book. Michelle Mitchell, author of Where Do Babies Come From?, as well as both the girls and the guys' guide to puberty and tweens. Thank you so much for being on the Happy Families podcast.
Thank you. Page 157, mooning.
I'll go and have a special look at that page as soon as I finish this conversation. I'm so glad that you got mileage out of it. And that makes me happy to know that you were happy putting it in.
It's a bit of a slow start. We have to kind of warm it up now.
Yeah, you made up for it. It was really great. Thanks for being with me, Michelle, and I'm sure that this book's going to be so helpful for so many families.
Thanks, Justin.
The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rullon from Bridge Media. We will link to these resources in the show notes as promised. And if you'd like more information and more resources generally about making your family happier, happyfamilies.com.au.